Now, we all love our crochet, but they say the grass is always greener on the other side. And sometimes you just want to be able to pull off those classic knit textures like the V-shaped knit stitch, ribbing, and cables. Well, I've got 5 techniques that'll help you do just that. I'll start with the most beginner-friendly option, working into the back loop. Back loop crochet can be worked in any basic crochet stitch to create beautiful rib textures and even emulate the knit stitch. All you have to do to work the back loop is examine your stitch, see the V-shaped stitch on top of all your previous crochets. Rather than working your next row into that whole stitch, only insert your hook into the back loop of that V. And by working the crochet stitch of your choice into the back loop, it leaves the front loop unworked to create the rib texture you see here. The shorter the stitch you're using, the more knit-like your piece will look, and the shortest stitch of all is a slip stitch. By working only slip stitches into the back loop, you can achieve that V-shaped knit stitch texture. Now, it can be kind of tedious to make an entire piece out of only slip stitches, but this is a great technique to use for small detail work like the brims of hats or the cuffs of sweaters. Now we're going to talk about the slightly trickier cousin of back loop crochet, and that is the camel stitch. The camel stitch is worked in half double crochet only, and rather than working into the back loop or the front loop, you're going to work into the loop in front of the front loop. We'll call it the front bar. So to work the camel stitch, you'll do a regular half double crochet up underneath that front bar. Insert your hook up from beneath the front bar to pull up a loop and complete your half double crochet. And by working up under the front bar, it leaves the entire stitch unworked. So both the front loop and the back loop lay to one side of your work, creating that V-shaped knit stitch look. And it can be kind of tricky to see where to put your last stitch of the row, so what I like to do is sort of tilt my work to the front and find that last knit stitch of the row. And I know that the front bar for him is right in front of the front loop. So that is the last front loop that I need to work under to complete my row. So camel stitch worked flat creates this deep ribbed texture, but where this stitch really excels is in the round, because every row those knit stitches lay to the same side. And camel stitches work completely differently in the round, because your front bar has now become the back bar. It actually lays behind the back loop when working in the round. So you will insert your hook down into the back bar. To complete your half double crochet stitch. And I love working camel stitch in the round because it is such a quick stitch to work up. And by getting all those little knit stitches to lay on one side, you can create a piece that really does look just like knitting. Next, we'll talk about front post, back post double crochet to create ribbing and even cables. To create a front post, on a bed of double crochet, insert your hook front to back between the posts of the previous row. Then weave your hook behind the back of the intended post to pull up a loop from the front of your work and behind that post. And then complete a double crochet as normal. This will make your double crochets kind of poke out on the front of your work. And the opposite of the front post double crochet is a back post double crochet. To do that, you'll insert your hook from back to front between the posts, weaving your hook in front of the intended post to pull up a loop from behind your work. Bring that loop in front of the post and complete a double crochet, causing your double crochet stitch to recess to the back of your work. And when you alternate these two stitches, front post and back post, it creates a simple ribbing reminiscent of 1x1 rib in knitting. It's a really easy way to add a ribbed brim when working like a top-down hat, for example. You can also employ front post, back post double crochet to work cables. I'll demonstrate on this simple 4-stitch cable here. I'm going to skip the first 2 double crochets and work a front post double crochet around the 3rd stitch in the lineup. Then I'll do a front post around the 4th stitch. Then to cable my stitches, I'm going to work backwards into that first stitch that I skipped. And lastly, I'll work a front post double crochet around the 2nd stitch. Then to complete the cable, you'll work back post double crochets on the opposite side in the reverse order. So I'll do a back post double crochet around that 2nd stitch. Followed by a back post double crochet around the 1st stitch. Then you can see the 3rd and 4th stitches are right here and here, and I just need to do back post double crochets around each of them. And that's how you can use front post, back post double crochet to create crochet cables. This is a very simple example, but there are literally infinite cable styles you can accomplish by just changing up the order in which you put your front post double crochets. Next up is another way to emulate the V-shaped knit stitch, and that's with this guy here called the waistcoat stitch, which is an extremely thick, dense fabric that is perfect for rugs or pot holders. And some of the keys to doing the waistcoat stitch is to use a stretchy yarn like a t-shirt yarn. Here I have a fiber-filled cotton tube yarn, and you'll want to use a bigger hook than what your yarn calls for. This yarn calls for a 12mm hook, and I'm using a 15mm hook. So the waistcoat stitch is a modified single crochet stitch. Rather than working into the actual stitch up here, you're going to work into the center of your single crochet stitches from the previous row. Ignoring this little guy on the side, I want to direct your attention to these little belts. And you can see underneath each belt is a little set of 2 legs. You're going to work your single crochet stitch between each of those legs. So skipping that little half stitch on the end, work your first single crochet directly in between those 2 legs from the previous row. Find the next set of legs and work a normal single crochet between them. I want to emphasize loose tension is your friend with the waistcoat stitch. Now at the very end, it's kind of hard to see where to put your last stitch. And it doesn't matter too much exactly where you put it, but you will have to put 1 extra stitch at the end to maintain your stitch count. I'm going to insert it right here where it kind of looks like I'm working between 2 little legs. Similarly to the camel stitch, working waistcoat stitch in the round takes it to a whole nother level. And the right side of your work will look exactly like knitting, because your little belts and legs actually sit on the back side of the work. And just like working flat, when working waistcoat stitch in the round, you're going to work your single crochets into the center of the stitch from the previous row. This loop on your hook can be tight, but this loop on your hook should be loose, just to make your life easier. It's a very tight, very dense stitch. But that makes it perfectly suited for home decor projects like rugs and plant holders in a beautiful knit look texture while only using crochet. Lastly, we have surface crochet, a way to add a knit stitch detail after the fact. So you'll need a finished piece of crochet to do this. Insert your hook between two posts of your finished piece and pull up a loop from the back of your work. Then you'll insert your hook between the next two posts, and while keeping your working yarn in the back of your work again, pull up a loop and make a slip stitch. And as long as you keep your working yarn in the back of your work, you can insert your hook between posts and continue pulling up slip stitches, working a neat little row of that V-shaped knit stitch anywhere in your project that you wanted to add that little bit of detail. I love combining this technique with camel stitch or back loop crochet to fill in any gaps where you think it needs it. So there you have it, my 5 techniques for adding some knit look effects to your crochet projects. I hope you're inspired to use some of these techniques in your next design. And I'll have a link to the corresponding blog post down below so you can revisit each of these techniques whenever you'd like. And as they become available, I'll link to any of the patterns you saw me demonstrating on in this video down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye!